Welcome to the School of Emotional Intelligence Life and Transition series. I'm Pariti, your host, and today I'm speaking with Robert Baker, a consultant and coach with more than 2 decades of experience in helping professionals navigate career change. Today, we're going to be talking about how to navigate leadership and career change in the times of AI.
Thanks, Purity, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Just a little bit of background about me. I spent 40 years in the corporate world with Mercer, the global HR consulting firm, working with major global companies like Unilever, FedEx, Rolls-Royce, on their people issues, basically how to get the most from their talent, how to reward their talent, how to develop their talent, etc. Towards the end of that, I took on the role of leader of the diversity and inclusion consulting practice, as it was called at the time, for the international region, because I'd always had a strong interest in gender equality, inclusion. I'd been involved in the setting up of the Women's Network at Mercer. I've been on the board already of several women's networks. So this diversity and inclusion role was perfect for me. But then when it came to leave Mercer, I figured that it would be nice to continue the work that I was doing in my own firm. And so that's what I'm doing today. I'm running workshops for companies, which I find myself now mostly with male executives talking about why men need to be more open to inclusion and gender balance, and how we all move forward together in an inclusive world, and how we make the most of all the diverse talent that we have available to us. So that's kind of what I'm doing, and I spend time, as I mentioned, with women's networks. I spend also time with men's groups as well, understanding the challenges that are coming through for men these days. And of course, in recent months, I've been spending a lot more time on the whole AI challenge, i.e., what's AI going to do to us, both as humans, both in terms of our work and our relationships, and how we navigate the world. Fascinating mix of opportunity and also caution, I think, there required. So let me stop there and pass back to you to start the conversation, Brady.
Thanks for such a lovely introduction, Robert, and thanks for doing the amazing work that you do on the inclusion front. Especially, I was just reading this book. I've just picked it up, only 25 pages through. That's called Invisible Women.
Hmm.
And
Caroline Criado Perez, right?
yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one. And
yeah.
then I've been looking at the work that you do when it comes to inclusion, and men talking about inclusion is just hits different. So what you've been doing and how you've been talking about it means a lot. And we work with MBA candidates across the globe. There's a handful of people when it comes to writing about emotional intelligence. There are very few people who talk about inclusion, especially the other gender.
Yeah,
I would like
yeah,
to
yeah.
call them that. And we do talk about it a lot. I've got my co-founder also over here, and we talk about how important it is, even for males to talk about the other gender in the application. It really helps you stand out. So that's
Uh,
the loveliest part of the work that you've been doing in the past few years. But before I dive into the session, because it's emotional intelligence, I'm really curious to know what got you interested on the inclusion side of the corporate.
well, I think one of the things was very much that I was at university with some very smart, capable women. But when I went into the corporate world, I found they weren't necessarily progressing, or they weren't getting into senior positions. And I felt that we were missing a trick in companies, generally speaking, that we weren't kind of somehow providing an environment where women could really thrive. And my involvement with women's networks very much kind of supported that, because a lot of the women in those women's networks were basically finding the glass ceilings, the sort of things that the barriers and the challenges that women face. So for me, I was always kind of interested in why that was, like why didn't we have more equality? Because I've always enjoyed working alongside others, and so like why wouldn't I enjoy working with women, and together we crack major problems. On the gender front, just very quickly to say, I think the other thing that's great about diversity is now, of course, we have multiple genders. I mean, we have people who describe or identify themselves in a variety of different ways. And I think, obviously in the past, we've been a bit binary about this. It was men and there's women, but of course, even within men, there's a whole variety of different kind of men. Within women, there's a whole variety of different women. So, it's important, I think, for us to recognize that we're all individuals, really. But what we bring is this incredible diversity of background, thought, experience. And if companies and organizations can basically create environments where those people can come together, work together well, thrive. And if the leaders in those organizations support that and know how to lead in that environment, then I think we're heading in the right direction. And going back to AI, for example, I think the challenges of AI will not be solved by one gender alone or by one nationality alone or whatever. We're going to need to work on this as a human race, as it were, to solve the issues. And I think one of the things we've got to watch out for is any of the gaps that might appear that we've seen in the past between the experiences of different groups. So already we see men sort of pushing ahead in AI, and we don't want to see women getting left behind, for example. So we've got to make sure we are leveling the playing field as best we can. So just some initial thoughts there to respond to your question. But yeah, I've always been strongly interested in a whole fairness topic, and I think today the fairness topic is still a huge one in the workplace. So I think we need to be on top of that.
Thanks for doing all the meaningful work that you do. And I think now we're ready to dive deep into what's happening to the world. So, my first question to you would be, in your work, having worked with so many leaders and professionals over so many years, what kinds of transitions feel most destabilizing for leaders today?
Wow. Okay. Um, well, I mean, obviously, there's a lot going on in the world right now with geopolitics as well as things like technology. And so, one of the big destabilizing factors for many leaders in the companies that I'm working with right now is, the geopolitical environment is changing rapidly and is quite volatile. So, for example, companies I'm working with that are now subject to tariffs, for example, or subject to other restrictions on the talent that they can bring in, are suddenly finding that the world that they were kind of relying on to exist, is changing underneath them. So I think there's those kind of transitions. Where are we now? And of course, in the UK, we had Brexit, and we're still seeing the pain that caused us in terms of separating us, if you like, from the European Union, and that was a transition that was very painful, basically, and one that we're still working through. So I think there's an economic and there's a sort of social, economic, and there's a geopolitical kind of whole series of transitions going on. And then, of course, there's the transitions caused by technology, and there, obviously, the principal one we're thinking about today is AI. And most of the leaders that I'm talking to today are still trying to work out what does AI really mean for their business, what does it mean for their people, what access do they give people, what tools do they use, how do they deploy it, what does it mean for the talent they need to hire today, what does it mean for the way that talent can progress. I mean, so we've obviously read a lot about entry level jobs disappearing because companies are preferring to go to use AI. So yeah, so I think there's very important organizational transitions that are going on, and then of course if there are personal transitions, we're all having to pivot as individuals. How do we make the most of this technology? How do we access it? How do we understand it? How do we look at the advantages that it brings, but also the risks that it brings, both for us as individuals with things like privacy, but also broader risks, for example, potential impact on the planet with the sustainability point of all of this data centers and AI, etc. And then, of course, the point of how are we going to work together alongside AI. I mean, personally, I'm a great believer in this is going to help us all do more. But then the other question that's arising is, does that just mean we'll end up with more pressure to do even more? And we're on a path to burnout if we're not careful. And so it's really interesting, this whole topic of how we're navigating this, because this is uncharted territory, as you said. I mean, yes, we've had the Industrial Revolution. Before that, we've had the invention of the wheel or whatever it is, all these big things, the printing press, whatever it is. There's been these major things, the invention of the internet, whatever. But AI and AI coming in, we've never had anything quite like this, and the impact is going to be huge. So we do need to prepare ourselves for it and be thinking about it, not just blindly trusting that everything's going to work out well.
Do you also see that, what we see is very external right now, in the leaders, what everybody's talking about on the internet, on LinkedIn, but what is really happening in the inner world of these leaders? Are they scared? What do you think they're feeling? How, because you work with them really closely, so
Yeah.
we'll be interested in understanding how are they experiencing it internally.
Well, I think that there's a recognition in a sense that they're just at the start of their learning journeys on AI. It's not that leaders know everything about AI and know how to deploy it. I mean, they're really often, some of them are really kind of on their learning journey about this. And I think it's fair to say there's a high degree of anxiety because now, of course, we're all worried that our competitor will find a way to use AI that pushes them far ahead in the competitive race, and we get left behind. So there's an anxiety that comes from is someone going to use this tool in a way that we haven't seen how to use it, and then suddenly we get left behind. I think there's a degree of anxiety, and of course there's a question now about how to deploy AI within the organization. And one of the clients I was talking to last week basically said, they haven't got licenses for everybody for AI in their organization, and now the leaders are deciding who gets licenses, and there's going to be really interesting questions about, well, how the leaders allocate those licenses. How do we make sure there's no bias in that? And I think, once we start to see humans interacting with AI, that's when, some of those biases can come through. So yeah, I mean, the bottom line is there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety. Not everybody's confessing to it because, to be honest with you, leaders are meant to be the people that know all the answers. And I think one of the things I'm really hopeful for from all of this is actually it will persuade leaders to be a bit more vulnerable, a bit more humble about, look, actually, we don't have the answer to this. We need to work on it together, rather than this kind of hero leader that pretends that they've got the answer to everything and everything's all right. I mean, yes, people in your workforce do need reassurance that they're going to have a job next year, if that's possible. So therefore, you've got to engage with them. You've got to build that trust in what you say to them. But I think the bottom line is this is a complex transition we're talking about here, with unknown as yet to be found outcomes, as it were. And so in that environment, it's really hard for leaders. And I think there's an element of, on the one hand, wanted to pull back. So, for example, pulling back from recruitment was, let's not over recruit if AI is going to be more powerful for us. On the other hand, we need to get stuff done. So how do we deploy AI, and are we doing it in the right way? Are we doing it effectively? Yeah. So lots of concerns and considerations and anxieties, I think, for leaders, even if they're not fessing up to that.
Yeah, there are a lot of emotions that you just named, if I'm labeling, there's anxiety, there's, this humbling experience. Do you see the difference between the leaders as well, that when you're training or coaching them, there's a certain set of leaders who are more anxious, and they end up making decisions in that pressure, while the ones who are being vulnerable and, having the humbling experience, they're really thinking it through. Are you able to see the difference in leaders somehow, how they're navigating their leadership at this stage?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. I think, obviously we can all kind of like be the leader that rushes to solutions because we need, speed is everything these days.
Yeah.
But actually, the leader that sometimes takes a bit more time can actually be more effective. One of the things we've been having a big discussion about with leaders recently is about just the very simple thing of introvert, extrovert. Increasingly we're being pushed to be extroverts as leaders, and yet actually sometimes the best leaders are the ones that are the quietest person in the room, or the one that speak last. So I think one thing that is coming clear, though, is I think that the leaders that are open to emotional intelligence, if you like, or use emotional intelligence more effectively, are probably the ones that are grappling with this better at the moment, because I think they are the people that are saying, we don't have all the answers, we need to work on this together, rather than being the kind of leader that's pretending everything's okay and they're going to have all the answers. So I think there are leaders who are approaching this differently, and I see the ones that are using a kind of more emotional intelligence led collaborative approach, basically being the ones that, from what I can see up to now, taking others with them and instilling more trust in those, but also they're actually being more effective as well.
That's amazing. And in your coaching techniques, are you employing any of the emotional intelligence frameworks to coach leaders on the same?
Yes. I mean, as part of the workshops that I run, those workshops include inclusive leadership and the capabilities we all need as inclusive leaders. And when you look at what the definition of an inclusive leader is, it is someone who is able to collaborate, is humble, can be empathetic, is prepared to be vulnerable. That's the definition of inclusive leader. And what we found is that in the workplace today, we're getting more and more diversity in the workforce. So some of the companies I'm working with have over 100 different nationalities in their workforce. So leaders that know how to work across that kind of scenario are ones that are incredibly effective. So that means emotional intelligence. It also means cultural intelligence, because actually we're bringing together people from a lot of different cultures. I mean, I was with a company in Berlin recently, and obviously Berlin's a very diverse city. But just looking around the room, we had people from Iran, we had people from Ukraine, people from India, like there were employees from everywhere, all trying to work together. So I think, being able to create those environments, I think and being able to lead in those environments is absolutely critical. So yeah, coming back to the skills that I'm trying to help leaders develop, it is the emotional intelligence skill set, which I think is behind all this. And as Daniel Goleman once said, the great news is that emotional intelligence is learnable. So it isn't something you either have or don't have. We can all learn it, or another way I would phrase it is we can all develop that muscle. Okay, so the more you practice being open and vulnerable and humble, the easier it gets the next time around, and the more you build trust in the meantime. And it's very interesting. I mean, Daniele Fiandaca and I, he runs Token Man, and he and I ran a survey a couple of years ago about leaders, and we asked leaders, what were they experiencing in terms of the benefits of being involved in inclusion and allyship, and 97% of them said they'd become a better leader through being more open to emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, and the sort of the methods behind allyship.
That's lovely, and that's a beautiful work that you've been doing. So, do you see resistance in teams or, certain, I wouldn't say countries because you work multiculturally, but any backgrounds where, like you said, that, they're more anxious, they're trying to take the next step as fast as possible, and we have to be more vulnerable. But do you see resistance in any kind of leaders to emotional intelligence in the world of AI?
Well, yeah, I think we do. I mean, because now everyone's in a hurry, and everyone's looking at like the next quarter's results, and how to move ahead in a world where, in a sense, we're going backwards a little bit on inclusion, where actually people are prioritizing more now. Oh, let's just get business done. Doesn't really matter how we do it. Let's just get the results. I feel that's coming back a bit with maybe the economic pressures that are coming through on companies. They're trying to cut costs, be as efficient as possible, and with nothing wrong with that. But in doing that, sometimes they're losing sight of the fact they've got to take care of their people, because it's their people that are really going to ultimately be a sustainable source of advantage for them. So yeah, there is some resistance to the message on inclusion, the message to emotional intelligence. I still think there's also some old school thinking out there about what a leader looks like, and of course what a male leader looks like. I mean, I think it's very interesting, this whole topic of, how do men lead versus women lead? I've seen some interesting differences in styles. Zenger and Folkman did this amazing study over the years of 360-degree feedback on women and men leaders. And what they found was that actually women were more effective leaders than men because of the emotional intelligence and the ability that they had to collaborate. So there is pushback coming. I think there's also pushback coming because there's now we're seeing some women disappear from the workforce. I mean, some women are leaving because they're frustrated with the environment, the workplace, the acceleration of their careers. That's not happening. So what I worry about is we're getting back into kind of a much more male-dominated culture in some organizations, which prioritizes the very short term and progress over everything else. And like for example, obviously, Sam Altman recently declared code red at OpenAI. And what does code red mean? It means we all got to work harder, longer, sleep under our desks, and the pressures on people in that environment are huge.
Yeah.
So that's a definite pushback, because there's going to be a whole bunch of people that aren't going to either be able to do that or want to do that. So it's going to you're going to end up with a self-selecting bunch of people that do things the same way, and there's a danger in that.
Yeah. And since you mentioned Code Red, and you work across the globe as well with different cultures, there are some cultures which are very accepting of code red. Of course, when we're in the US right now, you're in the US, you see the American culture is very hustle kind. Same goes for some countries like India, Singapore. But when it comes to Europe, they've been very touchy and very, they have strong boundaries about how they want to spend their time, and they really want to spend time with their families. Do you see that, with the kind of shift happening towards code red, will it affect the productivity of different companies based out of the culture that they're based out of?
Wow. Yeah, that's another great question. I mean, I think certainly what we've seen is that certain countries and certain cultures have generated a sort of more balanced approach towards life. So, typically the Scandinavian countries, for example, have
Yeah.
prioritized, working, I don't know, say, 9 to 5, and then switching off and going and doing family stuff, right? Or, and maybe a concept of part-time work as well to balance responsibilities. Um, so I think what they discovered, actually, I remember seeing a study in Sweden, which they did, which showed that actually Swedish workers were just as productive, even working less hours. There was this question about, well, you work all these long hours, but really, are you being productive? And I think this is the real challenge with something like a code red. Are people really being pushed beyond the boundaries, if you like, of where they can come up with great ideas, but also are they burning themselves out? I think the other thing that's very interesting is I see younger generations come into the workforce uh, who want a different deal. They don't necessarily want to work all the hours in the day. They want balance. And actually, I speak to a lot of younger men who are working, and they have partners that are working, and they've got kids, and they're trying to balance up. But hang on a minute, my wife's got a powerful job. I've got a powerful job. Like how the hell do we manage that and the kids and everything? And so I think there's also the fact that reality's changed. We have now generations coming into the workforce who are expecting to need to have more balance. So you've got to sort of factor that against the code red kind of scenario. Um, so yeah, I think there are certain cultures, like you mentioned, US, UK, probably, where we're prepared to give up more to put it into work, and sometimes at the personal cost to us of our relationships with our families, etc. Um, but there'll be other cultures where they still prioritize that. And what's going to be very interesting to see is, can, for example, the Scandinavian countries and companies maintain that work-life balance in an environment where everybody's being encouraged to work the extra hour to make sure that no one gets left behind, competitively. So, we're going to see how those play out. But I would like to feel that we can still somehow find that balance, because I think, it's going to help us stay sane in dealing with the world that we've got in front of us.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice take. And I'm also interested in finding out what the new balance in the new world is going to look like. I think you've really given me a lot to think about today. We could close with this one last very sensitive thing, which I am observing a lot of professionals, with 5, 7 years of experience, and even with 10, 12, 15 years of experience, who really questioning everything that they've done. So right now I'm working with this girl who's studying supply chain. She's not really sure what to make out of it. And then there was someone with 7 years of experience in marketing, is not able to figure out what they have to do next. So my question is, do you see people struggling with their identity? Has identity crisis become a big thing in the world of AI? And do you have any tips on navigating this? Because I've been seeing it spreading out like an epidemic. Identity
Wow.
crisis like never before. So
Right. And just to clarify, is that an identity crisis caused by the work that they do and the challenge that they have then of the work changing maybe? And
yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. Because it's
yeah, yeah,
AI is
yeah,
changing how, I mean, what they do and how they associate with work, and they're not doing the same things anymore, probably. So a lot of things happening.
yeah. Well, and of course, at the other end, Elon Musk is saying none of us are going to be doing any work
Yeah.
in a decade. We're going to be AI is going to be running, machines are going to be running, and robots are going to be running everything, and we'll just sit there and drink margaritas all day or whatever it is we're going to do. Uh, that's a real concern to me, because obviously I think people need some kind of work to give them identity, to give them purpose, and to give them, a place in the world. So yeah, I was actually speaking only earlier today to one of my new mentees, and she was talking about the crisis that she's seeing, in terms of the way that work is shifting and the way that it's causing her to question how she can find work that's in line with her values. And I think this is kind of partly what's happening now. So people are worried that the work they're going to be doing is changing. They're worried about, does the work they're going to be doing, is it consistent with the values that they have? How are they going to navigate that? I'm certainly seeing, especially amongst, I mean, she's in her 30s, so that generation I see is struggling with this issue at the moment. So the way through it, I think, actually, is to reflect on what skills and strengths you have as a person, and what you bring, and how you're going to develop yourself. And you kind of want to focus really on where you think you can, you know, they say add value. I mean, how you can be productive, how you can help others. And I think as you move forward with that, that helps you to develop that sense of identity. But yeah, I think we have to kind of decouple ourselves really from work when it comes to identity, because so much of our identity actually can come from other sources as well. So as this whole balance changes and the nature of work changes, I think we need to identify potentially ourselves differently. So, for example, I would identify partly through the work that I do, but also through a lot of the pro bono stuff that I do, or the other work that I do, and making sure that I'm connecting with people that that help me think that through, and that we sort of share similar kind of views on how to shape life. So yeah, very important question. No completely clear answers yet, but I think I recognize that crisis is happening, and I think the more we reflect on ourselves and what we can do. There's a really good philosophy called Adler. It's an Adlerian philosophy of basically, let me just focus on the tasks that I can do, and let other people worry about the tasks that they can do. So let me focus on myself, and how I identify will be the way forward, I think.
Thanks, Robert. So I do gather that figuring out your own values, this is high time, and we are at the intersection of what's going to become of us and what has been. I think it's really important to sit down with yourself, introspect, apply some frameworks, or just do some thinking, go on a retreat, just slow down and figure out what is the next thing to do, which is closest to our values, and not just rush into doing things.
Yeah.
That's the key takeaway over here, because everybody here right now is rushing, panicking, and there's this global anxiety I see all around, and people are unsure. Everybody is. I think we really need to develop that muscle, you said, the neuroplasticity and the skill that we are comfortable sitting with this massive uncertainty of all times.
Absolutely. And being open to talk about it, I think, is one of the starting points. Basically, it's acknowledging that we're all sitting with that discomfort, and we're still, in a sense, working on the answers, for us as individuals, and us as societies and companies. So yeah, I think we should definitely reflect that.